He had spent his entire career learning how to read people. Not the obvious signs, not the things they wanted you to see. The pauses, the inconsistencies, the way a story bends when it's been told too many times. As a police detective, he had learned that lies were rarely loud. They were quiet, practical, reasonable, and most of the time, they came from strangers. That was the belief he carried into every room, every interview, every decision. It was also the belief that followed him home. From the outside, his life looked controlled, balanced, predictable. A long career without scandals. A reputation built on restraint, not aggression. Colleagues trusted his judgment because he didn't rush it. He wasn't known for dramatic arrests or public victories. He was known for knowing when not to act. At home, things were just as measured. No chaos, no volatility, no obvious secrets. She fit into that life easily. Too easily, perhaps. They met later than most people do. After mistakes, after losses, after both of them had learned to value calm over intensity. She wasn't impressed by his badge, didn't ask about cases, didn't romanticize the job. That alone made her different. She listened more than she spoke. And when she spoke, she chose her words carefully, not to impress, but to avoid saying too much. He mistook that for maturity. Their relationship never announced itself as something dramatic. It grew quietly, the way routines do. Morning coffee, late dinners, long conversations that didn't feel like interrogations. She didn't challenge his authority. She didn't compete with it either. If anything, she softened it. When he talked about work, she didn't give advice. She asked questions, simple ones, the kind that made him feel understood rather than corrected. Over time, he began to trust her judgment, not because she insisted on it, but because she never seemed to need it. The past came up once, briefly, almost accidentally. Not in the form of a confession, not in the way people reveal something heavy, more like an administrative detail. She had been involved with the wrong people years ago. A structured world, a disciplined one, not street crime, not chaos. Something organized, controlled, hierarchical. She didn't name it. She didn't need to. She said she had left that life behind long before they met. That it was over. Resolved. Finished. The way she spoke about it mattered more than what she said. There was no pride, no shame, just distance. Like someone describing a country they once lived in, but no longer recognized. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? People leave bad chapters behind all the time. That's what adulthood is supposed to look like. He didn't ask questions. Not because he was afraid of the answers, but because there was nothing in her present behavior that justified digging into the past. She wasn't secretive. She didn't disappear. She didn't hide messages or take unexplained calls. Her life was almost boring. And boring felt safe. At work, his days followed patterns he trusted. Cases moved slowly. Decisions were made carefully. He was known for rejecting urgency when it felt manufactured. He believed panic was a tool used by people who wanted control. Ironically, that belief had kept him alive in the job. At home, she reinforced it. Whenever he talked about pressure, deadlines, expectations, internal politics, she responded the same way. Take your time. Don't let them rush you. Nothing good comes from reacting too fast. It sounded like support. It felt like support. There was comfort in being with someone who didn't push, didn't demand, didn't escalate. Someone who believed in caution. Over time, her presence became part of how he thought. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a visible one. More like background noise. The kind you only notice when it stops. When colleagues argued for aggressive approaches, He leaned back. When operations suggested bold moves, he hesitated. He told himself it was experience talking. And maybe it was. He had seen enough damage caused by impatience. Enough careers destroyed by impulsive decisions. Caution wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. That's what he told himself. And every time he said it out loud, she agreed. Not enthusiastically. Not insistently. Just enough to confirm that he wasn't alone in that view. At night, when the house was quiet, he felt something he rarely felt during the day. Certainty. Not about the world, but about his choices. He believed the most dangerous lies were the ones people told out loud. The obvious ones. The desperate ones. He didn't realize that the most influential lies were the ones that never needed to be spoken. The first time it happened, it didn't feel like anything. A meeting ran late. A briefing turned into an argument. Someone pushed a plan too hard, too fast, as if speed itself could replace certainty. He watched the room the way he always did, quietly, without reacting. A younger officer insisted they had to move now, that waiting would cost them. That hesitation was weakness. He didn't agree. Not yet. And when the room finally emptied, he went home with the same thought he'd carried for years. Urgency is a tool. She was in the kitchen when he arrived. The house smelled like something warm: garlic, oil, the kind of food that made you slow down without realizing it. He didn't tell her details. He rarely did. But he mentioned the pressure, the push, the feeling that people were trying to force his hand. She didn't ask what the case was. She didn't ask names. She just said calmly, as if it was a truth she'd learned long ago. People rush when they're afraid. Don't let their fear become your plan. He felt his shoulders drop. It sounded like support, like love, like wisdom. He nodded because he believed it. The next week, something else happened. A confidential tip came in through an anonymous channel. Short, clean, almost professional. It wasn't the kind of message that screamed desperation. It was precise. Too precise. The team wanted to act immediately. A quick move. A quick win. A public result. He read it twice. He didn't doubt the tip. He doubted the timing. He took it home with him, not as a file, just as a thought. At dinner, he mentioned it the way he mentioned most things, indirectly. There's a situation. People want a quick response. It feels staged. She didn't hesitate. Staged how? The question was small, but it landed hard. Because it was the right question. The exact question he'd asked himself in his office. He explained it in vague terms. Careful not to cross a line. She listened. Then she said something that seemed harmless. Some people create noise to hide the real movement. He paused. It wasn't a dramatic statement. It wasn't even specific, but it did something subtle inside him. It made him picture the situation differently. Not as a single event, but as a distraction. He went back to work the next day and slowed everything down. He didn't cancel the operation. He didn't shut anyone down. He simply demanded more confirmation, more surveillance, more time. And in the end, the tip led to nothing. Not a trap. Not a disaster. Just nothing. The team was frustrated. They blamed bad intel, bad luck, wasted time. He felt relief. Because relief meant he had done the right thing. And he didn't notice how quickly he had accepted her framing. Noise. Movement. Distraction. The words settled in his mind, like they belonged there. After that, the pattern didn't announce itself. It blended. A casual comment here. A question there. She never told him what to do. She never said, drop this, or go there, or trust me. She didn't need to. Her influence didn't come from instruction. It came from shaping the way he interpreted pressure. When someone in his department insisted on aggressive action, she would say, Why do they need you to decide today? When a colleague became overly confident, she would shrug and say, "Confidence is often a mask." When a witness statement felt too clean, too convenient, she would tilt her head and ask, "Who benefits from that version?" None of it sounded wrong. In fact, it sounded like the kind of thinking that kept officers alive. He started using her questions in meetings. Not intentionally. Not consciously. He'd hear a plan. Then, he'd hear her voice in his head. Why today? Who benefits? What's the noise hiding? He told himself it was just good judgment, that his experience was sharpening, because that's what it felt like, until it didn't. It began with small anomalies, cases that drifted, investigations that stalled not because there were no leads, but because the leads stopped feeling reliable. Every time something looked obvious, he found reasons to doubt it. Every time something demanded urgency, he insisted on slowing it down. His supervisors liked his caution until it started costing them. His team respected his restraint until it started frustrating them. They didn't accuse him, not directly, but he started hearing it in the pauses, the subtle shift in tone when they brought him information, as if they were bracing for him to say no. At home, none of that existed. At home, he was still the calm one, the measured one, and she was still the person who made that calm feel justified. One night, he came home later than usual. Rain on his coat. Streetlights spilling dull yellow across the hallway. He didn't speak at first. She didn't push. That was another thing he loved about her. She never demanded immediate emotion. Eventually, he said, "I feel like everyone is trying to force outcomes." She poured him a drink and asked quietly, "And when people force outcomes, what happens to the parts they don't want you to see?" He stared at the glass. It was such a simple question, but it made him feel something he couldn't name, a faint tension, like a door closing somewhere behind him. He said, "I don't know." She nodded, as if that was the correct answer. Then she said, "Good. Not knowing keeps you alive." He smiled. He thought it was love. He thought she was protecting him from the stress of the job. He didn't realize he was being trained. Not trained like an academy. Not trained with lessons. Trained through repetition, through phrasing, through a worldview that made caution feel like safety and safety feel like morality. He didn't notice the way she spoke about risk. She didn't talk about justice the way people in law enforcement did. She didn't talk about right and wrong like a courtroom. She talked about survival, about positioning, about what people do when they believe they're cornered. He assumed she had learned that from hardship, from a difficult life before she met him. He assumed it was wisdom earned. But there were moments, rare, subtle moments, when her calm felt too exact, like a person who wasn't calming herself, like a person who had never truly stopped being alert. It showed in tiny things. The way she noticed cars that stayed too long at a stoplight, the way she remembered faces from places they visited once, the way she avoided certain streets without explaining why. If he pointed it out, she smiled and said, "Habit." He accepted that. Because habit is normal. Because everybody has habits. And because he didn't want to be the kind of man who interrogated the person he loved. The job stayed at work. The relationship stayed at home. That boundary made him feel mature, healthy, in control. The irony was that the boundary was an illusion, because she wasn't entering his work through secrets. She was entering it through him, through the space in his mind where decisions are made. Over time, he started to feel proud of how little he reacted. He started to see restraint not only as strategy, but as character. And whenever he questioned himself, whenever he wondered if he was delaying too much, she would say something that brought him back to certainty. Fast decisions are usually someone else's decisions. It sounded true. It felt true. And because it felt true, he didn't test it. Then came the night that changed the shape of everything. He arrived home with a file in his head he couldn't shake. Not a case, not a criminal. A pattern. A sequence of small failures, small delays, small detours. None catastrophic on their own, but together, forming a shape. He sat at the kitchen table, silent. She noticed immediately. "What is it?" she asked. He stared at the countertop as if answers could appear in the grain. "I think I've been looking at the wrong things," he said. She didn't respond, not at first. And in that pause, he heard something unfamiliar. Not fear, not guilt. A kind of calculation. She leaned in slightly and asked, softly, "Or have they been making you look at the wrong things?" He looked up at her, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel relief. He felt the faintest chill. Because the question didn't sound like support anymore. It sounded like a tool, and he couldn't tell when it had become one.
He didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, not because of guilt, because his mind refused to stop rearranging the past. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments that had once felt insignificant. Conversations that had ended in agreement. Decisions that had felt cautious, responsible, inevitable. Now they returned with different weight, not as accusations, as questions. At work the next morning, he did something he had never done before. He didn't review new cases. He reviewed old decisions, not outcomes, decisions. He opened files that had been closed quietly, cases that hadn't failed loudly enough to be remembered as mistakes. He wasn't looking for corruption. He wasn't looking for betrayal. He was looking for patterns. And patterns, once you start seeing them, don't announce themselves. They accumulate. A decision to wait. A decision to redirect. A decision to deprioritize, each one justified, each one defensible, each one aligned with his belief that urgency was often artificial. But as he mapped them out, something unsettled him. The same types of cases stalled, the same kinds of signals were dismissed. Anything that relied on speed, anything that demanded immediate disruption, anything that assumed boldness was safer than restraint. He noticed something else too. None of those decisions had been influenced by direct pressure. No bribes, no threats, no interference. They had been influenced by interpretation, by how risk was framed, by how danger was perceived, by what felt reasonable in the moment. And suddenly, the thought he had been avoiding surfaced fully formed. Where did that framing come from? He tried to reject it immediately. This was arrogance, he told himself. The ego of someone who wanted a single explanation for complex failures. Life wasn't that neat. But the thought didn't disappear. It sharpened. At lunch, he caught himself listening differently to his colleagues, not to what they said, but to what he filtered out. When someone argued for urgency, he noticed his immediate resistance. When someone insisted something couldn't wait, he felt the instinct to slow it down. It was reflex now. Conditioned. That realization disturbed him more than any external threat ever had. Because reflexes aren't chosen. They're learned. That evening, he watched her more carefully. Not suspiciously, not aggressively, just attentively. She moved through the house the same way she always did. Quietly, efficiently, aware of space. When she spoke, she still asked questions instead of giving answers, but now he noticed which questions. Always the ones that reframed urgency as danger. Always the ones that cast visibility as vulnerability. Always the ones that suggested movement was something to be survived, not initiated. He realized something then that made his chest tighten. She didn't think like someone who had escaped danger. She thought like someone who had adapted to it. There was a difference. People who escape danger talk about relief, about freedom, about leaving rules behind. People who adapt to danger carry the rules with them. He thought about the way she spoke of the past, not with fear, not with anger, with fluency, as if that world still made sense to her, as if it was still logical. That night, he asked a question he had never asked before. Not directly, casually. "Do you ever miss it?" he said. She looked up from what she was doing just for a second. "Miss what?" "That life. Before." She didn't tense. She didn't react emotionally. She smiled faintly and said, "You don't miss a fire. You just learn how not to get burned again." The answer landed wrong. Not because it was cruel, because it was precise. It wasn't the language of someone who had healed. It was the language of someone who had learned rules and never unlearned them. Rules about silence, rules about attention, rules about what happens when you stand out. In the days that followed, he stopped seeking reassurance from her. He stopped bringing work home as comfort. Instead, he did something far more dangerous. He started tracing influence. He wrote down phrases that had guided his thinking over the years, not just hers, his own. Noise hides movement. Urgency creates mistakes. Fast decisions serve someone else. They weren't lies. That was the problem. They were truths, taken too far. He realized then what had actually happened. She hadn't lied to him about her past. She had told him exactly who she was, just not what that past had taught her to believe about the world. She hadn't manipulated him to protect crime. She had shaped his worldview to avoid risk. And in a system built on accountability and visibility, avoidance was influence. He felt something colder than betrayal, responsibility. Because every decision had been his. Every delay, every refusal, every moment of restraint. She hadn't forced anything. She had simply made one path feel safer than the other. The realization didn't come with relief. It came with weight. Because there was no villain to confront, no crime to expose, no correction to make. Only a truth that arrived too late to change the past. At work, he began acting differently. Not faster, more aware. He allowed urgency when it was earned. He questioned his own resistance before questioning others. And slowly, he noticed something unsettling. Things moved. Not recklessly, not chaotically, but decisively. And in that movement, he saw how much had been lost before. At home, the distance grew. Not emotionally, intellectually. She sensed it. People like her always did. One night, she asked, "You've been quiet lately." He looked at her and realized something else. She wasn't afraid of him knowing. She was afraid of him changing. Because the version of him she trusted was predictable, measured, cautious, slow. A man who wouldn't draw attention, a man who wouldn't disrupt structures. A man who survived. And for the first time, he wondered whether survival had ever been the right metric. He didn't accuse her. He didn't confront her. He didn't even explain what he had learned. Because the truth didn't require confession. It required acknowledgement. And acknowledgement would change everything. That night, he sat alone in the living room long after she went to bed. He understood now. The lie wasn't that the past was gone. The lie was that the past no longer decided the present. And in realizing that, he accepted the hardest truth of all. He hadn't been protecting justice. He had been preserving a worldview that didn't belong in his world. And once seen, it couldn't be unseen. He didn't confront her. Not because he was afraid, not because he wasn't sure, but because confrontation would turn it into something simple. A villain, a victim, a fight, and the truth was more complicated than that. The truth didn't fit into a single conversation. It lived in years, in habits, in choices that had felt like wisdom at the time. So instead of accusing her, he began doing something far more painful. He began accounting for the cost. Not the cost to his pride, the cost to everyone else. At work, he requested access to old timelines. Operations that had stalled, investigations that had cooled, decisions that had been justified as strategic patience. He didn't do it publicly. He didn't turn it into a dramatic internal audit. He did it quietly, the same way he had done everything. He made lists, not names, not targets, just outcomes. A witness who had disappeared from contact after he delayed protective measures. A financial case that had been deprioritized because it seemed too clean, too convenient, too staged. A network that had reorganized because enforcement moved slowly enough for them to adapt. None of it looked like sabotage. That was the devastating part. Because if it had looked like sabotage, it would have been easier to explain, easier to fix, easier to blame on something external. Instead, it looked like judgment. His judgment. He walked through his department one afternoon and realized that people weren't afraid of him. They were careful the way people are around someone who has the power to slow down their work with a single question. Careful the way people are around someone whose calm can become an obstacle. He had always believed his calm was an advantage. Now he saw what it could become, an excuse, a shield, a way for other people to wait behind him. If he wouldn't move, they didn't have to either. That night, he came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to feel peaceful. Now it felt like something else. He found her in the living room, a book open, the television muted. She looked up and smiled. "How was your day?" she asked. He studied her face, soft, composed, familiar. He tried for a moment to force anger, to reduce everything to betrayal. But anger didn't come. What came was a realization he hadn't wanted to face. She had loved him in her way. And her way of loving someone was protective. Not through warmth, through control, through reducing risk, through shaping outcomes without leaving fingerprints. He sat down across from her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he asked, gently, "When you left that world, what did you take with you?" Her expression didn't change immediately. But something in her eyes shifted. A fraction. A calculation that didn't look like guilt. It looked like readiness. She closed the book. "You mean habits," she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded. She leaned back slightly, still calm. "People don't leave a place like that and become soft," she said. "They become careful." The word careful hung between them like smoke. He swallowed. "Careful," he repeated. "Or afraid." A pause. Then she smiled in a way that wasn't mocking, but wasn't comforting either. "You call it fear," she said. "I call it staying alive." There it was. Not a confession, not an apology. A worldview. He realized she still didn't see the difference between survival and living. Because in her past, survival had been the only currency that mattered. And he had unknowingly imported that currency into a system that ran on transparency and accountability. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't accuse. He asked quietly, "Do you ever think that the rules that kept you alive back then aren't the rules we're supposed to live by now?" For the first time, her calm faltered, not dramatically, just enough to reveal that the question had reached something inside her. She looked away, toward the window. Outside, the streetlights glowed on wet pavement. When she spoke, her voice stayed steady, but softer. "Those rules kept me from losing everything," she said. He waited. She continued. "And then I met you, a man who believed the world could be clean, controlled, rational." He felt his stomach tighten. She looked back at him. "I didn't want your world to destroy you," she said. "So I taught you how to survive mine." He stared at her. He understood, in that moment, that she believed this was love. That she believed she had saved him. The tragedy was that she had been saving him from a danger that wasn't actually there. Or, rather, the danger existed, but not in the way she had understood it. In his world, danger wasn't only in the streets, it was in indecision, in fear disguised as caution, in delay disguised as wisdom. He said, carefully, "Do you realize what that did to me?" She didn't answer. He continued, "Do you realize what it did to other people?" That was the point where her eyes hardened. Not with cruelty, with defense. Because now the conversation wasn't about them, it was about impact. And impact was harder to argue with than intention. "I never asked you to do anything illegal," she said. "I know," he replied. And the simple agreement made her blink. because she expected accusation. He wasn't giving her one. He wasn't offering her the comfort of being either guilty or innocent. He was placing her in the only place she couldn't escape, responsibility without intent. He stood up and walked slowly to the kitchen, as if movement itself required permission. He poured water, took a sip, then said without looking at her, "The worst part is, you didn't force me. You didn't manipulate me the way people think manipulation happens." Silence. He turned back. "You just made one way of thinking feel safer than the other," he said. "And I let it happen because it felt like peace." He saw something shift in her face again. Not guilt, not shame, grief. The grief of someone realizing their survival skills had become a weapon in a different environment. He sat back down. His voice was calm, but the calm was different now. It wasn't certainty. It was acceptance. "I can't go back," he said. "Not to who I was." She stared at him. "What does that mean?" she asked. He held her gaze. "It means I'm going to do my job differently," he said. "And it means you need to understand that you can't shape my world from the shadows anymore." Her jaw tightened. "You think I'm your enemy," she said. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I think your past is." The statement hit harder than shouting ever could, because it wasn't personal. It was structural. He watched her process it, and he realized something else. She didn't know how to exist without rules, without control, without the ability to reduce uncertainty by shaping outcomes. That's what that world had taught her. And when she left it, she hadn't replaced those lessons. She had only relocated them into him, into their home, into his mind. The room felt smaller, not because of threat, because of history. He thought about leaving, the obvious ending, the ending people would expect. But endings like that were clean, simple, satisfying. This story wasn't. So instead, he made a choice that felt quiet and irreversible. He said, "I don't hate you." She flinched slightly, as if the words hurt more than anger. "I believe you thought you were protecting me," he continued. "But protection isn't the same as control." She looked down, a long pause. Then she whispered, "I didn't know how else to love." That was the closest thing to a confession she could give. And it was enough. Not to fix anything, but to name it. He nodded slowly. "And I didn't know how to notice," he said. "Because it didn't look like danger." He stood again. This time, he moved with purpose. He walked to the window and stared outside. The street was empty, quiet. The kind of quiet that used to feel like safety. Now he understood it differently. Quiet could be peace, or it could be avoidance. And he had spent years mistaking one for the other. He turned back toward her. His voice was low, controlled. "The past didn't chase us," he said. "We carried it." She didn't respond. She couldn't, because what could she say to that? He didn't ask her to change overnight. He didn't demand redemption. He didn't threaten. He simply said the truth out loud. The kind of truth that changes the future by existing. "From now on," he said, "we don't pretend it's over. We stop calling it over." Silence. She nodded once, barely, not agreement. Acknowledgement. And in that small motion, he understood the final consequence. Some lies don't explode. They don't destroy in a single night. They shape decades. They decide the future quietly, through choices that feel safe in the moment, and by the time you notice, you've already lived inside them. He turned off the lights as he walked down the hallway. Behind him, she remained seated, still, as if movement would make the truth more real. In the dark, he thought the final thought that would haunt him longer than any case file ever had. She had left that world, but she never left the rules that kept her alive inside it, and he had paid that price without knowing.